Hey Stephen, you're right. Hold on. Need to get
Yeah.
my. Yeah, here we go. I can hear you now.
Good. Shall I? How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. You're right.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in Frankfurt today.
Yeah. You traveling around?
Yeah, a little. Frankfurt is close to my house. It's 50
Okay.
minutes, maybe an
Yeah.
hour.
Okay.
It's easy.
Yeah.
What shall we do about the background, Simon? Because
Uh-huh.
I don't like it.
Your background, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can go to where you've got the button that says video or stop video. There's a
Yeah.
small arrow.
I don't have it.
So yeah, you've got mute and then stop video, and then just to the right corner of the stop video
Yeah.
square is an arrow that points upwards.
Oh no, wait. I have a different here. Hintergründe
yeah.
en effecten. So shall I?
And then you can pick you can go to choose virtual background. Is that visible for you? I guess maybe it's not in English, but
Yeah, no, but I just realized I only have the
okay, you got
Vistar
it.
one. I have the
Right.
Vistar one,
Okay.
which we maybe don't want to do.
Yeah.
Wait, give me a second, Simon,
Sure.
because I think I have some other stuff here.
Yeah. I've got some that I could share with you if you want. And there are some standard ones in Zoom as well. Do you not have standard ones
Oh
available?
no, I have a nice one here. I have a nice one.
You do? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So the format for this will be, I think, primarily audio, but also the video as well. So it is a good thing to check. I've got the recording on already, but obviously I'll just clip it. So
Yeah, that's fine.
I just don't want to forget later on. Oh, nice. That's super. Yeah.
And sit here where I have a little bit more light. Exactly. Yeah. See, getting
Cool.
there.
Very cool.
All right.
Yeah. So I've got a little bit of a script to make a start on it, but let's not rush it. Let's just kind of get ourselves into the conversation first. So yeah, how are you doing? You've got a busy day today?
I have a fairly busy day, both professionally but also privately, because at the end of the day, I'm going to visit a potentially new school for my daughter.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
But not unhappy that it's almost weekend.
Yes, yeah, that's important stuff actually, isn't it? Because she'll be there for a few years, I guess. So yeah,
she's very how should I say it? She's very smart. So she loves to read but she loves to read. She writes stories. She's very young. She's very insightful and analytic, and but at the same time she's quite shy, and she loves to kind of live in her little fantasy world, and we want to make sure that there is a school that gets her kind of smartness, and at the same time allows her to be a child.
Yeah. How old is she?
She just turned 8.
Okay. Yeah, so she's still little.
Yeah, she's little.
Sweet. Yeah, nice. Well, good luck with that. So is there anything that you want to tweak in terms of the questions that we had exchanged on?
So what I didn't do is send you my notes, but I did make some notes. I like the questions. I was just wondering, I thought about your last question. What's the sentence what's the question that I would have asked had I been you? And I'm not sure if my answer to that is a good closing one.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So you might want, like we discussed about the format, I leave it up to you. You might want to shuffle a few of them around.
Yes.
That you get to maybe to an answer that fits better as a last question.
Yes. Yeah. So what I might do is simply swap 9 and 10.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, because the optimizers is interesting and perhaps something a little bit different for everybody. So it's kind of.
So the question 6 is read or listened to recently that inspired me. So yeah, I have quite a few books that I listed there. Yeah. What's of course something to do. Maybe something that's interesting to do is to either put a quick picture of the book into the video, or at least for someone to provide the links to the Amazon book.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let me just make a note on that. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And then anything else?
No.
Okay, great. Good. So I'm just going to read out a little script that I've drafted for the beginning, just so you know what it's going to sound like, and also just to validate the language in terms of like the job title and how I'm describing Vistra in there. I'm saying, let me just read it from the top, and then, you can react. So I'm going to start with like 4 or 5 lines. So, hello and welcome to this conversation about transformative leadership. I'm Simon from ICANN Coaching and the creator of the Aligned Program Executive Accelerator. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Van Tol, who is the European CEO for Vistra, a global corporate services firm. We'll be talking about inspirational leadership, emotional intelligence, resilience, and focus, all in context of transformation, the world of projects, programs, and product development. So, Stephen, thanks for joining me today. We've worked together on this sentence. I want to soften that beginning, it's a bit rushed. So we've worked together on a global product launch, and I've seen you embody the type of project sponsor that I call the Aligned Program Executive. So you're on the Exco for a global services firm. What were the key factors and abilities that played a role in that journey to Exco for you? So that's then getting into the first question. Yeah. So
all right, very good. Okay.
Yeah. Sound all right? Yeah. The first bit.
So one question.
The title. Yes.
Are you okay with me referring in the way that I answer to, like me, for example, saying, when you sent me the questions, or when I was preparing for these questions, I thought of, something like that. Are you okay with that, or you want to avoid that it comes across as this?
Yeah, I would prefer to avoid it. Okay, but maybe to rephrase it into, hey, yeah, when we were talking before this about that topic, that might be a better turn of phrase. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Or we touched on this when we were talking earlier, blah, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the title, you're happy with European CEO?
Yeah, well, that's actually factually incorrect. I would say managing director for Europe.
Okay.
That's factually correct.
Right. Let me get that straight. So it's managing director. And maybe we should actually begin with a little bit more of, I should probably let you do an introductory piece first before that question, because I mean, what do you think? I don't know how much you can or want to say about, this is what I do. This is the size type stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I can do a few sentences. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
So, So before I launch into that question, you're on Exco for a global services firm. What are the key factors and abilities? I will start when I've said, I've seen you embody the type of project sponsor that I call the Aligned Program Executive. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Yeah. And then I'll go into that question to say, okay, so how did you get there? What were the key abilities? So that's how to do it.
Yeah? I think, you know, for me also let's say the personal aspect of leadership is very important. So I might add in something about, you know, my personal life, you know.
Okay. So rather than tell us about what you do, tell us about yourself. Okay.
Sure.
This is fun because this is the first one of these that I'm doing. I'm going to have a little series of them. So I really appreciate your willingness to do it, by the way. It's great. And I'm enjoying the process, actually. It's good. So cool. So let me just tweak this so that I don't get my knickers in a twist when I start talking. When we're actually doing it for real, you always fluff it, right? I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing. Tell us about yourself, and then you'll say what you about yourself, and you'll talk then about your work.
Yep.
And so then I probably don't need to say you're on the Exco for a global services firm. I'll just respond to you.
Sure.
Right? That's how it's going to go. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Good. Anything else?
No, let's go.
Cool. Okay, good. Awesome. All right. So let's just sort of take a pause. Let me have a sip of coffee. Hello and welcome to this conversation about transformative leadership. I'm Simon from ICANN Coaching. Actually, do you know what? My eyes are up, aren't they? What I want to do, I want to fix that because my camera is here and my words are over here. So if I'm looking like this, is that okay if it was something you were watching?
Yeah, don't worry too much about it because everybody's used to the fact that your camera is in a different position on whatever device you have. So
it's normal, really, isn't it?
People also do not know where my face is on your screen. So you typically look, of course, at the person that you're speaking with.
Thanks.
Which
that's
is
really good.
So don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. Thanks. Okay. All right, good. Hello and welcome to this conversation about transformative leadership. I'm Simon from ICANN Coaching and the creator of the Aligned Program Executive Accelerator. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Van Tuijl, who is the Managing Director for Europe at Vistra. This is a global corporate services firm. We'll be talking about inspirational leadership, emotional intelligence, resilience, and focus, all in the context of transformation, our world of projects, programs, and product development. So, Stephen, thanks for joining me today. We've worked together on a global product launch, and I've seen you embody the type of project sponsor that I call the Aligned Program Executive. So tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Simon. I'm really happy to join you and that you invited me. Well, very briefly, as you mentioned, I have the honor of leading Vistra's European business, which consists of 18 markets across Europe, some small, some big, and a fantastic team of about 1,500 people. I'm Dutch, as you probably hear from my accent. I've lived in Switzerland for almost 10 years, and I've now been living in Germany for about 8 years. And I'm married, have 4 small children who are getting bigger every day and who are a great source of inspiration.
Awesome. Yeah. They bring so much color to life, right? Yeah. So the role that you play, being on Exco, and the size of the organization that you've got, how did you get there? What would you say were the key factors and the key abilities that play a role in your journey to Exco?
Well, I mean, I think on one end, there's always very particular factors that influence why you end up specifically at one spot. But I think to generalize a little bit, I was always extremely impatient in the past, and I think some of that I still have. But I would say one thing is, give yourself a little bit of time, right? When you join a new organization, or when you find yourself in a new situation, allow yourself a little bit of time, and specifically when you start running bigger parts of businesses, and you get that responsibility, you need that time to understand the bigger picture. Because only when you understand that bigger picture, you can first of all understand where people are coming from, but also start making decisions that drive that bigger picture forward, rather than just elements of it. I think the other thing is that you need to learn how to prioritize. If very, very simply put, if you would progress through your career and you never learn how to prioritize, you would always add additional new responsibilities on top of those that you already have, and at some point you go crazy. So you need to learn how to prioritize. That means you need to stop doing certain things, and you need to start doing some other stuff. And you need to be very clear about that and intentional about that. And it's such a cliche word, but it also means that you need to learn how to delegate, because the stuff that you've been doing obviously was important. So you need to make sure that you can give this to someone else that can either be a direct successor or also a broader team. I think another really important factor is you need to learn, and I cannot underline this enough, you need to learn to understand other people's perspectives. Dan Pink does a great session on this, that's around attunement.
Yes.
So how, we are all our own person, and we all have our own view of the world that is influenced by a lot of different factors. But you need to understand, first of all, that other people's view per se is very different than yours, right? Sometimes a bit closer, sometimes very far off. But you need to learn to understand how other people think and why they think like that, because they're equal to you, right? They're as entitled to their opinion and their view. So when you understand that, you dramatically increase the quality of your communication and your interaction, and it actually becomes like a superpower, because the quality of your decision making gets so much better. I think the other thing, and that it's my not yet the last point, but it does connect to my last point. You need to be really aware that you as a person determine how you and your ideas are perceived, and how you behave very much influences other people's opinion of you and their opinion of your ideas. And let me connect it then to my last point. I think, if you want to move ahead, you need to stand up, right? You need to stand up. You need to be bold. You need to take a risk. You need to stick your head out of the window. You need to be an example, and you need to be aware that you will make mistakes, and that some people might not like that, and that's okay. And I think you need to kind of feel at peace with yourself that's part of it, and that's part of the journey. It's all about how you do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much there, Stephen, isn't there? So there's a wisdom and a maturity that comes from those mistakes, and it's again about learning, isn't it? So I want to pick up on a couple of things that you've said there, because it's really closely aligned to the stuff that's in the program, actually. In fact, because what you are talking about is aligning my priorities and the things that are important for me now to what's important for the organization. So maybe I could explore that further. How do you make that match between the thing that you're going, the horse that you're going to back, the thing that you're going to champion, and how that can be also the most important thing in your view, the one thing to go after for the business? What's your method for doing that?
Well, I think the ability to understand how other people see the world also allows you to understand what's, in that common goal that you have, or that you would like for people to share, what's in it for them, what makes them tick, what's important for them. And you need to have that conversation, and you need to work on developing that ability, because at the moment that you understand through conversation and through carefully analyzing how other people look at that thing that you would like to do, you can address those things that are important for them, and you can assign, you can start assigning roles that fulfills their particular ambition. But it also learns you, it also teaches you, or you learn how to single out certain skills and drivers that make your project or your program or your initiative more successful. Because if you understand how other people tick, you can give them a role in this bigger picture that they like to play. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an alignment there of the people, the key people that you bring in to be part of the initiative, right? But what would you say, so if we're thinking about somebody who's at an earlier stage in their career, who is wanting to aspiring to be a great project sponsor, that wants to figure out, how do I've seen other people champion things and fail because they're on the wrong agenda, and it's not the most important thing for the organization. So I've seen you do some of this in terms of really understanding the industry and the cycle that the business is in, all of that stuff. So maybe you could share a little bit of your methodology around that as well.
Well, I think you need to spend enough time as needed to make clear what you are actually trying to achieve. And I think when you struggle to define that, I think the first job you have at hand is before you start bothering all kinds of other people with this, is to go back to your own concept and think, okay, what is it? When all this effort that we're now investing in this program, all these people that I'm putting together, what does this lead to? What does the business look like, or what does life look like in 6 months, in 1 month, in 1 year, in 2 and 3 years from now? What's the evidence of success that we want to see in an organization or in business or in life when we all start working really hard now? And we often talk then about metrics and KPIs and whatever, but I always like to think about, if we put that dot on the wall somewhere, say, this is where we're running towards. How does that dot look like? How does the world look like when I'm on that dot? And once you can convey that, you're also able to explain to people why they're doing certain things, what you need from them, how the plan to get there looks like, what their part in this whole thing is. And I think that's very important. And then when you combine that with what we discussed earlier, your ability to attune to other people's view on things, and I mean, we can call it differently, right? We can say, you just need to understand that all people hold themselves to different standards, and that within mapping out your journey and your final picture, you should not try to level the playing field, or you should not try to get everybody to adopt to the same kind of standards. You just you need to learn to play different styles. Right, and need to play to each player's strength. It's a bit like soccer. To be honest, I'm not a huge soccer fan, but for the analogy, it works. A good trainer doesn't try to create 11 midfield or 10 midfielders and a goalkeeper or whatever. He looks at each individual player and puts them in a position where they believe that he or she plays to their strengths. Exactly, and even looks at the opposing team to say, hey, I know the guys on the other side, so it would be better if you guys now swap. So, and that's what you need to do in when you do a project or a program or whatever initiative, you do the same, or even when you map out your organization.
Yeah. So what I was hearing a minute ago, a phrase comes to mind is freedom in the frame. So you've defined the frame, but it's really important to give that freedom, right? To give some sense of autonomy for people to really make it their own, to have that sense of agency, that sense of ownership over something.
Yes.
Otherwise it's not theirs. Yeah.
100%. And it's I mean, you addressed an interesting point, and I have a book in mind. We can perhaps later on speak a bit about that, because we touched on it when we spoke earlier. There's a fantastic book written by Ray Dalio, which is called Principles. And I actually came across that book later on, but I had very early been in contact with some material done by a Japanese psychologist whose name escapes me at the moment, but which is all about, you can only create success for an organization and the people in that organization when you allow every single individual to have a maximum amount of responsibility and autonomy. Which basically comes down to what you just said. It means for us as leaders or as managers that we set the framework, we set the principles for successful operation, and we give people the autonomy and the responsibility to work within their own capabilities and skills and ambitions within that framework. And that's also, there's an interesting other aspect to that it's a bit of a thing that I often see. People do not make mistakes on purpose, right? Yes. People make mistakes in 99.99999% of the cases because their frame of reference was not correctly set. So when stuff happens in your organization, or when people do make mistakes, which always happens because we're human beings, it's absolutely pointless to point your finger at a person. That person did not intentionally make that mistake. You need to ask yourself as a people leader, what do I need to do to set the framework for that decision making, for that autonomy, for that more clearly, so that this mistake can no longer happen, that the person who was requested to make that decision at that point has more reference, more framework to hold on to make that decision.
I'm really hearing that sense of accountability, right? And when something goes wrong, what did I do? What can I do differently next time, rather than that sort of blame game? Great. So lots of things there, lots of things around. So you said time for learning on the job in the beginning before you rush into solving things, and drawing conclusions, I guess. Prioritizing and focus. Learning really was about other people, and tuning in to other people. So empathy and attunement. And you said something about how you behave. I used the phrase show up. How does a leader show up, right? I think is really crucial, because it has such a contagion, an emotional contagion, a ripple effect on the people around you. And then the last thing you said was about being bold, standing up to move forward, which is nice. Yeah, it's a great phrase. Yeah, awesome. I'm standing up right now, actually. So does that count? So here's thinking back to the earlier part of your career. What was, if you think back to Stephen at the beginning of this journey, at the beginning of your career, what's one thing you wish you'd known then that you've learned since?
Are you referring to how should I put it? Stuff that happened in my career that I wish did not happen, or
no? So if you were meeting Stephen at 25, let's say, or that was just last year, of course, but early stage. What advice would you give?
I mean, you indicated to me when we spoke earlier that we were going to go this direction a little bit. I was thinking about, you know, a negative but abruptly positively transformative experience for myself, and that's, you know, when I was, I think one of the first things that I did early on that you could count as something, you know, more meaningful is I was very painfully confronted with a decision that I made where I chose image, you know, and how things looked on the outside over real value, and I ignored, you know, all the very obvious warning signals and voices in my in my own head, but also from other people, to say, hey, be careful. And that happened when I invested in a small company that proved to be an absolute dud, you know. And had I not been, you know, had I just taken the time to really assess the situation, I would not have done that. So when you, so if we think, if I think about what did I learn from that, or to rephrase into your question, what advice would I have given myself at that point is really, again, you know, take your time, you know, don't rush into something, right? But take your time to feel comfortable, right? You can never be 100% sure, but take your time to be comfortable that what you're going to do is the right thing. Look at the data first, right? And listen to your stomach. And I think that listening to your stomach, especially early on in your career, is maybe something that is more difficult to do. But I've felt that through the process of constantly thinking about what does my intuition say, and how does that match with the data that I'm seeing, with the factual evidence that I'm seeing, you grow more and more confident as you move along, right? So in the beginning, you're relying much more on data, and then on top of that, you start developing this instinct that is being fed, of course, by you know, making good and wrong decisions, etc. So I think these are the three things that I would
nice. I really like the intuition piece in particular, and it's underplayed actually. We go big on methodologies and data and task orientation, and that intuition can be so powerful actually. Well, okay, cool. And so maybe you've already mentioned and touched on this. Next question is about your biggest failure and what you learned from it.
Well, I guess that was it. That was that particular
that investment.
Investment back then. And I mean, obviously, you know, there are many instances where you know, I realized that I could have or should have done something differently, etc. But I think that experience relatively early on, how as negative as it was, and it cost me a lot of money back then, I would say that the benefit of that is that it triggered a certain behavior in myself and a realization in myself that helped me avoid repeating the same mistake, maybe in an even bigger style later on in my
nice. So there's a perspective that comes with time that actually it was probably a good thing. Ultimately.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
probably didn't feel that way at the time. The program, the Aligned Program Executive Accelerator, that you've seen something, you've seen the picture, you know, the middle of the sandwich is competencies. The whole thing is about developing leadership competencies. But the middle of the model is all about inspiring others, influencing and handling conflict. So in these big transformation efforts, in projects, programs, conflict is natural. And there's a skill involved in doing that. So could you share your own experience with those things? How do you inspire? How do you influence? How do you deal with conflict in your work?
Well, I've been thinking about that, and I wanted to share an experience that I've had about 7 years ago, because it was it was a major change program where I did not yet have that much experience at that point with you know, these kind of which I say with change transformative programs of this size. And secondly, it wasn't something that I had mapped out myself, which, you know, a lot of the change that I had done before were perhaps equal in size or similar, but I had the opportunity to map them out and plan them ahead. And this was something where you know, the volume was very big, and I was basically thrown right in the middle of it. And there was a deadline to it. And it takes me back, like I said, 7 years, where I was confronted with an ongoing project to migrate a very large amount of clients from one software platform to another platform. And the let's say the legacy platform that they were on was going to be switched off by the end of that year. So that migration had to be completed by the end of that year, or we would get into, you know, we would have a very significant additional challenge of not being able to serve these clients in the way that we needed to serve them anymore. And when I was launched into this,
so just to pick up the key points there, so you didn't shape it, you were stepping into someone else's shape, right?
Yeah.
And there was the stakes are high. The stakes are high. Exactly. There's a deadline, and failure is catastrophic. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, when I inherited that situation, there had been, let's say, a solution put in place that relied very heavily on an external partner. And when I started digging into that, I found out very soon that solution was not going to work, and that this partner had absolutely overpromised and so far had already underdelivered, and there was no evidence that they were going to deliver even, you know, close to what we needed. So the challenge that I was confronted with at that point was basically twofold. So first of all, I knew that we were never going to make that deadline, so I had to figure out how do we get this legacy platform to be compliant for 1 year more, with all the certification, et cetera, that was connected to it. And on the other hand, I had to find a different solution to do the actual work. And the only way to do that was to take it back in-house. And that meant that both the development of that platform needed to be done in-house as a job, as a very big job, on top of everything else that was like business as usual. And the migration work itself also needed to come back in-house and done by specialists that had a day job, right? And the volume of the work did not really allow time to go into the market and recruit a whole bunch of additional people to help with that. We managed to do that to a certain extent. But so long story short, in the end, what it meant was that there was a huge insecurity with the entire team that was faced with that group of clients, with the whole organization, because they knew, you know, if we wouldn't manage, you know, what potential implications that could have for the company. And they knew that if we were going to even have a chance of making it, they would need to work twice as hard on top of their normal job to get it done. So, the challenge that I saw myself faced with is how do I on one hand get a certain, how should I say it, trust into that organization that we're going to make it, while I did not have all the solutions myself yet.
Yes.
And how do I motivate people to go the extra mile in order to get there? And you know, at the end of the day,
so you've really painted that picture. This is a very challenging place to start. So you've got, you didn't shape it, you're working with what's already there. The team are under huge pressure. The external partner is not delivering, so you've had to make a bold decision to bring things in-house. So
at the end of the day, and because at least that's how I interpret your questions. So how do you go about that? And I think I think the first thing that we need to realize is that we're all human beings, right? And we all have our fears, and we're trying to do our best, and we have our ambitions, and we want to be part of it, right? So the first mistake I think that we could have made was to pretend that it was all fine and not share in the challenge, etc., because it was too big. So I chose for a very transparent, very open style of communication, where I really started to involve everybody in solutioning how we could get there, providing very regular updates, also being open about the things where we were very sure that were going to work, but also about the things where we're not yet sure, and what we still needed to do in order to figure that out.
Yes.
I decided to be very...
So you're creating some transparency and honesty.
Exactly, but also being very specific about what we were going to need of certain people in order to make it successful, because I needed to know immediately if people were on board, or if they say, well, I cannot do that, because that information was fine, but at least I knew that I had something to fix there, or something to solve for. Right. So, and in the end...
So in coaching, by the way, we would call something like that contracting. So how do we work together? Not a legal contract, but an
emotional like accountability or responsibility contract. The other thing that I believe helped was, I was right in the middle, right, the whole time. So I thought, people need to see me. They need to see what I'm doing to fix this. They need to hear me, explain about what's going on. And the thing is, especially in the beginning, of course, it's all fragile, because you're trying to put that plan B together. And once we had it and we started to seeing the first success, I immediately started to communicate that first success and say, okay, listen, we decided this, and this is now yielding these results. And also, hey, we decided this is not working well, so this is what we're doing now to fix it, and look at this. So we started to really build it up, and you saw that as we went along and people started to get confidence in the approach, that it almost became like a sports. People wanted to get to that finish line, and they were, we saw the volume of clients migrated being pushed up, etc. So it was great to see the impact of people finding confidence in what they were doing, and actually getting really excited. And we were actually done 1 month earlier.
Wow!
At the end of the day, which was amazing. Amazing. So that was it. In the end, it was a huge victory, although it was very, very difficult. And I think, still, I hope still that those people who were back then involved, that they're still very, very proud of themselves, because that was quite a feat. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah. So when this makes me think about the resilience model that I use. So I work with a company called the Resilience Engine, and we have a model there that's based on 15 years of research, and we look at an individual and a collective group's level of resilience, and one of the states we call bounce back, which is, I guess, a very common way of thinking about the word resilience, isn't it? Is that, bad things happen and I have to be able to stand up again. And you've got the intensity of rescue. That's a big project rescue, a big business turnaround that you've just talked about there. And it can be hugely rewarding, hugely fun, but also exhausting, isn't it? Yes. So that's the thing that we really point out with a bouncing back kind of state, is the big ups and downs that comes with that. It can feel quite turbulent, And then, we get into, over the long run, we're talking about, it's challenging. So maybe I could ask you about that. So you've got a great example there of a really challenging crisis management turnaround situation, and you've shown through a whole number of tactics that you've used, a whole number of strategies that you've used. One of them is leading by example, another is contracting with the people to get that clear agreement and commitment, and a fresh look at, are you with me here? Is how I'm interpreting that. I like the thing about celebrating successes. That's huge, isn't it? And recognition that comes with that. It makes me think about habits and, the way to achieve or the way to embed new behaviors and habits. A big part of that is celebrating. And there's a whole body of work on that. So there's so many things in there: the transparency, the honesty. Those are the ingredients. But with all of that, you've then had to drive a rescue to a successful conclusion. And so the question finally is, how do you think about the human consequences and the resilience and the support that people need? And 7 years ago today, actually, the conversation has changed as well. So we have more awareness and more dialogue and discourse around mental health and burnout and those kind of things. What do you think about those kind of topics? How do you view them?
Well, I think maybe let me tie it back to something that we discussed in preparation for this session, where you talked about what has helped you along the way, and for me, this example was something that happened along that way. And I often talk about the fact that the more we speak about automation and systems and tooling, etc., the more important the human being becomes.
Yes.
Because by shifting a certain value to machines or to software, we automatically increase the value of the human being that's there, not only in the human being's function of let's say governing the machines and the software, but specifically in adding that specific value that only a human being can. And I think if you take a few steps back and you look at your life and you're really honest, those people that have had the most those I have to say it differently. The most value in life you get from the interaction that you have with people. Listening to them, observing them, asking other people for feedback, being very open about that. And I think you need to be a bit intentional about it, right? You need to be a little bit intentional about what kind of people do you surround yourself with. Because as we talked earlier about how as a leader it's important to set an example. If you choose the wrong people around you, and they set that example for you, and they influence you. So I think you need to be critical about the type of people that you surround yourself with. And if you do get into a situation where you see people setting the bad example, then take it as that, and say, hey, if someone setting a bad example, and let me learn from that as well. How should you not do something? Right? Be very critical about that. And I think I've been fortunate in my career so far that I have come across people who had the best intentions with me. Also, sometimes not, of course. I gave you this example from very early on in my career, but people that took the time for me, and I think that has also influenced how I would like to be a people. And
that's lovely. And that leads into the question, actually. Who are those people who have been the biggest influences on you?
Well, I mean, if we talk about the more professional environment, I have to think about three bosses that I've had in particular across the last, let's say 15, 20 years in my life. I think the first one who was really exemplary in taking time for his people and also outside of work to sit you down and to have a conversation and say, how are you feeling? And, who use the right triggers also to get to topics that you perhaps would not normally discuss at a coffee machine. And, he was very good at underlining how important it is that you believe in your own strength. That, don't compare yourself to others. You have your own strength and build on that, believe in that and trust that, on your way forward. I think that the second person who I met a little bit later on in my life, but who's still an important person in my life, he taught me, and I use that a lot, if things were easy, then everybody would do it. But he basically said, if things are easy, they often also carry less value, right?
Yes.
And that has always allowed me to balance tough times with very positive outcomes. It has made me realize that there's a reason why we are here, why we are fighting and challenging ourselves, etc. Because we want to get better constantly. Right? And I think that the third the third boss I had that came to mind when I was thinking about this question was, what he told me, what he made it very clear to me. It's something that you kind of instinctively know, I guess, but what he made very clear to me: agree and set your course. Yeah. And of course, you need to allow yourself to reevaluate, because things happen outside of your zone of influence that sometimes even force you to reassess if that's still the right course. I talked before about putting that dot on the wall. Sometimes you need to move that a little bit, but that's fine. But as long as you're on that road, don't get distracted, and make sure that every step you take actually takes you in the direction of that path and doesn't take you the opposite direction. So this being very agree and set your course, and being very consequential about it. Right? Yes. It's
and intentional, right?
And very intentional. And it sometimes starts with very small things, right? So yeah, but that's okay. I can give you an example. I recently had a discussion about a system that we're trying to centralize, where there was a proposal in one specific market to use a different system because it was a little bit cheaper than the other one. And you do need to have that bigger picture there and say, and that's a very small example, but it's maybe very, very tangible. So even though it's slightly less expensive, on the first glance, it does significantly increase the complexity of our system landscape again, and it's another system that needs to be maintained, and people do not, there's no compatibility between the two, etc. So I said, despite it being slightly more expensive, we stick to our path of reducing the number of systems and centralizing, etc. So right. And again, simple example, but that
no, it makes sense. It's a trade-off, isn't it? And you've got you've made a decision that's thinking longer term, but you can't think longer term. I think you're saying, without knowing your North Star, knowing that dot on the wall, knowing where I'm pointing, then I have no idea if this is right or wrong, because I haven't got that.
Exactly. And we talked earlier about setting that framework and setting the principles, and effectively this is an overarching one, right? That is perhaps, you said North Star. I like to use it as well. It's this is where we want to go, and that should already give you, let's say, the high level guidance. And you could once you've set it, you've agreed on that. Where are we going? And you've set the course. It's the first frame of reference for people, because you could very simply ask yourself the question: we need to make a decision today. Is this decision going to take me closer to that dot on the wall, to that North Star, or is it going to take me further away from it, or is it going to not move the needle at all? That should be your first guidance, right? That's your first measuring point. And as long as you can say, yes, it does take me closer, then you already have, let's say, 90% there around, is this the right decision to make?
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? It's such a foundation. So I'm going to zoom out then for the last couple of minutes that we've got. And I'm just thinking about all the connections into the development pipeline, the program, the 9 steps, the 9 modules that we have within. So, you touched on feedback and listening. Listening and empathy is part of the model. And with my emotional intelligence framework, we've got some really good practical ways to do that. The whole thing, across. And what we're talking about here with the North Star is really so important. And there are things that we can do to actually develop that. I really understand that vision and mission at a personal level, and of course doing that in the collective with your teams, right? So there's so many touch points, but maybe we could close out with what are you inspired by right now? What are you reading or what are you listening to that you would recommend?
So if you, before I answer the question, let me perhaps add one more thing. There's a really, at least there's something that I've identified for myself that has been incredibly important. Deliberately self-reflecting and asking feedback to others. I was triggered to this thought by what you just said. I've made a real habit of taking some time every day to really ask myself, okay, what did we do today? Where was I a part of? How do I feel about that? Am I happy with my contribution? Wonderful. Am I happy with the results? Am I happy with the impact that I had on what we're trying to achieve and on other people? And that goes 2 ways. And I think that the trick is to use that really as a development tool and not not get caught up in the stuff that you might have done better, but use it as an instrument to actually get better, right? And it often triggers me to think about what kind of impact have I made on someone else, and sometimes I think maybe I haven't been clear enough, or maybe this person might have gotten the wrong impression, or and I pick up the phone, or I drop a quick note and say, hey, by the way, it can also be that I realize what we agreed now is not per se going to lead us to the desired result. So we need to do it differently. So this self-reflect, the same goes for deliberately asking feedback from others, right?
Absolutely,
saying, what do you think of that? Do you think that's good? And this is something, when you do that deliberately and constantly, you get trained in self-reflecting in a constructive way. But especially also when you get feedback from others, in the beginning, people will be, especially when you start to get more senior positions, people will find it difficult to provide feedback because they're afraid that it will come across as you need to give people the comfort that they can tell you what they think.
Absolutely right.
And that,
it's
and
that
then you
trust,
also take it like
that safety to be able to do that.
Exactly.
I really like your daily reflection habit. I've got a question for you about that, but just to share that there's actually research on the practice of journaling. Positive psychology gives us lots and lots of great frames to do that kind of reflection, the kind of questions that you can ask yourself. It's really, the research is really fascinating on that, the impact it can have on you in your state, in your happiness, in your outcomes, in your performance, for so many things. There's a study of job seekers who they did a study, and they had a control group. One control group was given some guidance on how to go and apply for jobs. The other was additionally given a guided journal and told that you must do this every night. And those that were journaling were so much more successful, twice as successful at getting
I can very well imagine that.
That they had to cancel the study because it was so disproportionate and unfair. It was really interesting example. So, but how do you do that habit? How do you actually find the time, because you're so busy, you're traveling, you're in, 3 or 4 countries a week in the role that you have. So what do you do to keep that habit?
I mean, it's how shall I put it? It's for me. I do not journal, by the way. Although right. I do tend, things that I'm really pondering about. I do tend to write them down, and I use OneNote for it. I just have tabs, and I just write key notes down. But let's say the daily routine is very much purely a mental one, and sometimes that just takes 1 minute or 30 seconds of deliberate thinking. I do it in the shower, or while I brush my teeth, or when I'm sitting in the car, or something like that, or even in the evening when I'm cooking and I'm stirring in a pan or cutting something. Everybody who says I don't have time for that, that's doesn't want to do it, right?
This is the truth of focus, right? I can really try to focus on something to solve a problem, but actually your thinking happens when you think about something completely different, like cooking.
I mean, other people find the time to go to the gym an hour a day, which I should be doing, which I do not do. But I think that even you can combine it, right, while you're sitting on a cross trainer or lifting some weights. That's good as well. Yeah. So I think there's always time to do it. You just need it's much more about doing it than for me. The time is not a question. You need to train yourself to do it, and it's one for me one of the great tools to continuous improvement for yourself. And I think it creates a certain humbleness, because I think what I've learned is when something goes wrong, the first person I ask what the hell happened is myself.
Yes.
Now I always ask, what could I have done? What should I have done differently? And I think that's how you train yourself to think like that, rather than automatically kind of ask externally what could have done. No, what should I have done to influence that? Listen, I know that we're slowly running out of time. If you want, there's a couple of books that have been very impactful, and I'm happy to share also the links.
Please do.
I already mentioned Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, who wrote this book, Principles. What's interesting about this book is that Dalio has 2 parts. So he has a part about how his philosophy is philosophy around setting principles works for him in his business environment, and he has a part about private environment in his private life, which is equally, if not more, interesting. Then there's and I'm not sure if I can, I have to be careful for the audience, but there's a book written by a guy called Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a asterisk CK, which is a bit of a provocative title, but at the end of the day, he challenges you to think about, first of all, what really matters in your life, and to be honest with yourself about what really matters in your life, including your professional life. Challenges you to actively make the decision that means that other things are perhaps not as important as they are, and gives you some comfort around the fact that it's okay to just don't fuss about stuff that you cannot control. It's very nicely written. There's some other, I mean, I talked about principles a little bit. There's a guy called Rolf Dobelli. He's Swiss. He wrote a book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, which revolves a lot around biases that we have and how not to fall into bias traps, which is really interesting. Not so much because it teaches you how to not fall into a bias. Well, it doesn't teaches you to get rid of your biases. It teaches you to become aware of your bias.
Absolutely, makes sense.
Once you're aware, to say, okay, maybe I'm biased, let's check that, and let's make sure, right. So, and another book that helped me greatly, and I read them more or less at the same time, is a book called Factfulness, written by a guy called Hans Rosling.
Yes.
Who debunks a lot of the stuff that we think is happening, because the media project it like that, or because they've become, like the common understanding. and he completely debunks it by data, right?
Yes.
And by, so it's very well connected, and I would advise.
I really like the hope that comes from factfulness in particular.
Oh,
actually, right? It's really, it really makes you think. Oh wow, that's wonderful.
And there's, I mean, you talk about hope. There's a lot about the relativity of how we see certain things, because you remember the part where he speaks about how we complain that the world is getting worse, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And he completely destroys that concept by looking at the historical development, etc., and where we are now. So I think it's an extremely good book, and I would read it almost in combination with The Art of Thinking Clearly. I think the last one that I wanted to point out is Daniel Kahneman, who's I think you know him as well, Israeli American psychologist.
Yes.
A professor who wrote a book that many people know called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow.
Yes.
And he now has recently published another book called Noise.
Yes.
Which is all about, and that connects a little bit to the Mark Manson book around prioritizing. How does your brain work, right? There's a bit of biology in there. How does your brain work? And how do you use your brain and understand the way that your brain works to give the right attention to the right kind of things? How do you also filter out stuff that comes externally, maybe also because of biases, etc.? So when I was thinking about these books, I tried to put some together that also together form kind of a connected scope of perhaps some of the things.
It's an operating system.
Yeah, it's almost an operating system.
It really makes, it really, I can see that. I can see the cohesion of all of that coming together. Awesome. So any final words before I close this out?
No, thank you very much. I mean, it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I think something that we need to be acutely aware of as leaders in this day and age, that the quality of our leadership and the qualities of us as human beings, and the way that we interact with others around us, has taken a completely different form and a much more natural, logical, correct form, in my opinion, than it had in the past. And I'm a big proponent of completely non-hierarchical capability and skill-based organizations where people work in harmony based on what they do best. And you might sense that a lot of the things that I say go in that direction.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think it's good that we have these kind of conversations.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and Sim, that's for me why it's been fun today, but also fun working with you over a length of time as well. It's thank you. So my sort of closing thought for us today is we've just touched on so many rich ideas, and we've learned something about you and your experience in the real world. And that's really the closing thought I've got, is that it's easy for people to read books, listen to a podcast, or learn a new theory. It's all about, I believe it's really all about putting it into practice. And there's a frame that I really enjoy, is theory to practice to mastery. If you think about mastery and the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, that whole line of thinking, and that's where it's at, right? That's the action. So that's my final thought, is that it's not enough to know things, it's about what we do with them. Awareness that you've touched on is huge, actually. That's massive, and that's what we do in coaching, is raising that awareness in order to make choices. That's what it's all about, isn't it? So thank you very, very much, Stephen. Have a wonderful Friday, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Simon. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Take care.
Ciao.
Cool. So